Yeah, hello everyone.
Hiya.
Hello Brian. Hello Raymond. Good to see you again.
Same here, likewise.
I think, Raymond,
Good
your
to be
mic
here.
is down. Raymond, your mic is muted. Okay. Hello Freddie. How you doing? So based on our session talks about inclusive workspace, building a more diverse animation industry. I think this is really I guess first of all, people will just be wondering why am I speaking about? What am I speaking about? I think that's the first question. Everyone just wonders why are the guys just speaking about it? And I think there was even a comment on the LinkedIn page saying that this is not a diverse session. We should have women in the conversation, or we should have women, like. And I felt like, I think it's perspective. Like when we look at our continent and when we look at even from where we're in Nigeria, we just have the percentage of women in our industry is very, very slim. It's very, very slim. And I feel like having a conversation about having inclusive workspace without having men, or not just men, but also the leaders or people that have been in the industry for a while, that have been running studios for over a decade. It would be wrong to not have that kind of conversations with them. So that's one of the reasons why when we came up for this session, we felt like this was the best opportunity to hear from studio owners, and also the opportunity also for the women to form build allies as they build the industry. I think that's just the major thing. Like I feel like that's where the conversation is majorly focused on. And definitely all studio owners here, I think I'll give everybody like a few minutes to introduce themselves. So I'll just take it up from, let me start from Nigeria. Brian, let Brian let him take the floor.
Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yeah.
Can you all hear me clearly? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. My name is Brian Wilson. I am co-founder of Zero Gravity Studios based here in Lagos. And we try to be as diverse as possible as far as the topic is concerned. And I think I'll speak more on that, as the course of this session. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's have Raymond. Okay, let's have Freddie first. Let's have Freddie. I think Raymond will join us very soon.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, MB, for having me. I'm grateful to be part of the conversation. So, Freddie Ajinese is my name. I am the CEO and the co-founder of Magic Carpet Studios, based here in Lagos. Yeah, and I'm glad to be part of this conversation.
Thank you very much, Freddie. I think finally let's have Raymond, our guest, all the way from Uganda.
And there's not enough diversity on this panel here. You see, there's not enough diversity here. There's only Nigerians here. I can see what that comment was about, right? So, Raymond Malinga, I'm the CEO of Creatures Animation here in Kampala, Uganda. And yeah, I'm excited to have this discussion because this topic is one that I think needs to be discussed and openly, an open forum. And yeah, let's just get into it and see what happens.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys for making out time. I know things have really changed in the industry in the last 5 years, where we have more activities in the industry. So I'm really grateful for you guys making out time in your busy schedule. We know it was short notice, but it was awesome having amazing people on these sessions, and just to hear from the industry people. So I think maybe the first thing I would just ask is, as a studio owner, from your own experience over the years, how will you say the state of the gender diversity in the industry is? Like, how will you say, where is the state of that, of the industry when it comes to as a studio owner, and how have you seen it in the last decade, so to say? Freddie, do you want to go?
Okay, fine. So I think for me, I would say it's growing. We're coming from a time when we had most of the women at the time in the studio were people who were supporting in non-technical roles like finance, HR, operations. But we expanded at some point and had the technical side, female animators in the studio. And this year we've had more female animators in the studio than we've had at any point in time. And that's something that I think came out of a result of being a bit more intentional. I really think for me, understanding the need to have diverse work environments that can be inclusive of the female gender is less about diversity and inclusion. I really think it's a business advantage. I've worked extensively well with most of the ladies that we have done that have been in the studio. And the good part of having them on board is they contribute ideas and they bring perspective so that it's not just all testosterone induced creative process that powers what we do. So for me, it's an advantage because somewhere along the line, women tend to have an emotional connection and somehow a perspective to certain character developments that we just can't have, or even the research cannot give alone. So if there are about 50% of the world's population, if women are pretty much part of the fabric of existence, we cannot have less of them in the studio. But I do know one of the reasons why we have underrepresentation is not that studios are not necessarily open to the idea, but the supply side for female talent is still very much of a challenge. I mean, we're still on learning and on doing the aspect that technical roles are not very female. So yeah, things like animation and the work culture as well with animation can be very challenging for women. Most times, studio culture means people sort of stay over at the studio or work longer hours. And somehow, for most women, as you start to date, your boyfriend will want more of your time, I suppose. And you start to have children, your kids and your husband wants more of your time. So we do really need to start rethinking work environments as we grow as a company to introduce policies that can allow for women to have more flexible options to work. And I think that's where we're headed as a studio. But more than any other time in the history of the company, I'm glad to have more female on the technical side than we've ever had.
Should I go?
Thank you for the comments. Raymond, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think Ferdy has summarized most of it, and I agree with almost everything you just said, and you put it quite eloquently. Also, now, and it has been really, now imagine like Lagos and Nigeria, your population is really large, right? So you, just by statistically, you have more ladies than us, you know? But then there's a percentage of the women in there, how many of them are interested in animation anyway? So now just look at Uganda that has a third of your population. And that problem that you're having in terms of supply, it's like slashed by a third over here. And that doesn't mean that there's a direct correlation with population and interest in the industry. It just means that that's just the reality that we're facing right now. So it's something similar, but just at a much smaller scale in terms of the supply, right? So through my investigation of this, I found that when you go through the institutions that are actually training animation in Uganda, you find that in a class of 12 or 15, you have like 1 or 2 girls maximum, and animation tends to be quite a tricky course to do. And so even of those 15, let's say the 13 boys who are in that course, not all of them make it to the end, right? And so imagine now you start off with 2 girls. It's not uncommon to see every cohort there's no girl or 1 girl or 2 girls, and that means that the availability on the technical side in the industry is very little. Now, there have been initiatives that have been carried out, and I think I don't believe in this, but sometimes they say that they tend to appeal to other aspects of the industry that might not need to, let's say, the overnights, you know. Let's say if it comes down to, like, let's say writing, where you can do it at home, or like the drawing, concept art. But I think that there's a space for women in all aspects of the industry, but we need to listen to how to what the problems they're facing are and adjust our industry accordingly. Because I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think it's when I see someone on my team telling me, oh, I need to leave home because of this reason, instead of penalizing that person for it, I just adjust my company to fit that person, as long as there are people who actually deliver work. So that's just the way I didn't want to add on I just wanted to add something different, because Fadi, I think I'd already covered most of it.
And Brian, would you like to say something or add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would corroborate with what Ferdy and Ray have said. And especially with African studios or with Nigerian studios, there's definitely a preponderance of testosterone and male, dominance in the studios, especially in technical roles, like Ferdy mentioned. I mean, for most people, my studio inclusive, there would have been, I mean, over the years we've had females come in and leave, and most of them started out in technical roles. But I mean, as time went on, we started having people in more in admin roles, but as time went on, we started having people in more technical roles. So doing animation, doing concept art, doing design, stuff like that, which is good. And I think it's the zeitgeist that there's more females, coming into the industry and being interested in more technical roles in animation and so on. So I think, even though there's definitely male dominance in most of the studios, and I don't even think it's a Nigerian or an African thing. I think globally it's, the way things are, but I think as time goes on, there'll be more and more females. I mean, if I look at when I was in uni, it wasn't balanced as far as the females and males. There was definitely more males, but there was quite a number of females as well. And I think as time goes on, there'll be more and more females coming into the industry as a whole in more technical and creative roles. Thank you.
Now you mentioned university, it's actually a very good place to actually notice the gap already that is existing, and just in that creative department, you just notice there are less females in that creative department. And I was having a conversation with one of my staff, like I think it was probably a year ago, when we were trying to launch the Afro Women community, Afro Women in Animation community, and they were asking, is it also open for guys to come for the event? And I said yes. And I tried to explain it from my own experience, and just like from the experience of a Nigerian or African kid. As growing up as kids, we have this separation that happens as kids. The daughters go to the kitchen while the boys are not allowed into the kitchen. And there's already that dynamics that is already painting the perspective of what men should do and what women should do. And somehow we are all programmed as we grow up to think that way. There's some certain things. We still remember, even back then, our parents, we had our mothers stay at home. Some people's mothers stay at home. They don't work while the fathers go out. So I think there's that perspective. That's why saying that we want to have men in the conversation is very important, because some people still have that perspective that it's not something women should be doing. And like you said, truly, in our own studio, when we just had a lot of guys sitting around. And I think when we had few people come in, it was maybe because they were doing their NYC. If I can remember, even though as much as my wife works also with the studio, I don't think I've ever noticed that there were no women in the studio. I just knew my wife was working in the studio. I never thought about it, in that sense. But I think when we had more people come into the studio, and there were women coming for NYC, it was just automatically thinking in the way as a leader to just say, why didn't you try something like social media? Why didn't you try something like in admin? Just thinking that, it might be just too technical for you to actually handle. And let's start maybe soft, like, in that sense. That's how I was thinking. But it was weird how even as we tried to do the social media thing and we had to train them in graphics and all that, and they were picking up even video editing, you later realize like, I think we should have just pushed them to that other space. So I think even just in the school setting, there's some career paths that you just see there are less women, you know, especially like you said, in the creative arts, you just see there are less people, and there's that conversation of, I think the conversation has to even go back to that place, not even before just talking as the industry. Why is it that there are less people? Why are they not encouraging women into that career path? You know, I think that's one thing that is very important. Another thing I wanted to ask was like maybe how is it important for how is it important for why is it important for women to have men as allies in this particular thing? You know, I think it's always like, I think we need to answer that question because there's some creative or people in the industry are thinking it's a woman's thing. Like they feel like they just have this notion like it's a woman thing. But why do you think it's important that we should have men actively contributing to that or actively being part of the conversation as leaders? Anybody can take it from me.
I'd like to. I think, you know, straight off the top of my head, I would think that a career like nursing would be female dominated, you know, but there's many other careers that are just male dominated just because they are. I mean, I don't think there's a good reason why there should be more male animators than female animators, but it's just the way it is. And so to your question as to why men need to be their allies, I think I would just say because usually the people who start the studios are male, you know, and if, you know, the people at the helm or the people running the studios or the people in more senior roles in the studios actually develop the mindset that it's necessary to have females on, especially in higher roles, leadership roles, directing, storytelling, you know, writing leads and so on, then I think, you know, the men then need to develop that mindset that it's beneficial and necessary to have females on board in more key roles, and therefore to, you know, reach that helping hand out to mentor them, to, you know, to essentially raise them up to the level where they're capable of, you know, leading in such roles. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I would say I think it's for the reason any group that's trying to get their foothold anywhere needs allies. You know, it's difficult, you know. So here's the thing: if you have a couple of men who understand the plight of what women are going through in the industry, we can translate it to a language to the other men who don't understand this, right? And sometimes, bless their souls, I think sometimes it's just because of culture, you know, that people have been raised and they just expect some things. Just going back to what MB is saying, and that doesn't mean that it's correct that they do, but just means that if there's a lady in your team who really wants to be an animator, the guys have to understand that you shouldn't start from a position of she's a lady, you know, because there are some biases like that in the industry. You know, she's a lady, they think that she can't handle the workload. But hey, there's some female animators who can handle the workload way more than the male animators. And if you don't give them a chance, you'll never know this. And so you need people who can defend them, give them a chance, a space, and an opportunity to prove themselves, so that it opens up more and more examples of ladies who are thriving, and so that other ladies are inspired, and then so the chain keeps on flowing that way.
You know, there was I think, you know, previously, just to give you a backstory of how we got here, where we started the community. So around 2020, and we wanted to celebrate the International Women's Day. At that point in our studio, we noticed that we had like a couple of women in the studio, and it now became something for a date for us to mark and actually celebrate. And one of someone that joined the studio through NYC, now she's now a production coordinator, Ladi Wada. She suggested that we always have like an aligned session, have conversations, invite the other women and celebrate them. And that's how this started, you know. But last year, you know, I was just thinking about it like in the sense that we are still seeing the same ratio of like nothing is really changing in that sense. Like it just feels like we're ticking a box, so to say. And it's not something that is our culture, where we just do things for doing sake. And I started thinking about it like, what exactly will be what actions could we take to actually effectively have more women in the industry? And while I was having that conversation with my team, it crossed my mind that sympathy isn't inclusion. You know, being sympathetic about something cannot translate into inclusion. In the sense that if you want something to be inclusive, you have to be strategic about it. You have to be intentional. There has to be a plan. There has to be so many things for it to actually work than just being sympathetic in that sense, where you're just like, you know, we should have more women, blah, blah, blah. And that's when we decided to start the community. And the reason why we started the community is that so that each person is held accountable for what they are doing in the community. That's the industry leader as a woman, and also the person that is trying to seek help within the industry to join the industry. So we can pair them one-on-one. Now, I want to, like, my question will be, how important is mentorship in that sense? How can mentorship in that sense really help, or how can we create some kind of, as studio owners, how can we create some kind of structure that actually helps the outcome to be able to measure what is happening in the industry? Not that we're just having this conversation and there's nothing we can actually use to measure. What are the things beyond mentorship or other things that we can actually do to create an increase or even improve on the workspace for it to be more conducive, you know, to be more inclusive, to be more, you know, active, you know, in that sense? What would be your perspective on that?
I would have wanted Fadi to start with this, but I think he's having some problems. But what I would say is, you know, it's a bit of it's. I hear where you're coming from, right? Because sometimes it feels like we do all we can, you know, but then the ratios just don't seem to change, and you're wondering like, what are we doing wrong, you know? And I've heard this all over the continent. You know, if you talk to studio owners, they're like, man, like so many different approaches. Huh? My view is this. Okay, I believe in undeniable measures of success. So if you do a project and there was a lady who was working on that project, you have to highlight her. People have to see her, right? Because that is very valuable. A credit is very valuable. A credit does so much as much for you as it does for anyone else, you know? And I've learned that like the respect is put on someone's name when they have a credit, right? No, I'm actually an animator who did this. So our lead animator in our studio, now she has been leading Kunda and Friends. She animated on Herder Boy Kizazimoto. Like, you'll be nuts not to listen to what she has to say. You get what I mean? Eh? And I found that the ones that I let's say the few ladies who do work with me, I try my best to give them agency in the departments that they work in, make sure that they are making the decisions, and so that everyone around can see that, no, there is some valuable input coming from there. And I do this for everyone, the men and the women, but there's a tendency to, because I've looked at other studios, some of them like in the country as well, and there's just this complete dismissal of a lady's capability. And I'm like, but have you heard what she has done before? What's her credit? What has she achieved? What ideas? If she gives you an idea, have you tried it out? Maybe you might be surprised. So I think that that's the first step, to put the ladies that we do have, we should highlight them and make them visible. And I'll just let the others add on so that I don't talk for too long. Ferdy, I'm dying to hear your voice.
So I'm curious about Raymond's story before we go to Ferdy, sorry. And as to whether, you know, this lead animator you mentioned, who's female, came in as, you know, an animator, or did she like grow in your studio, learn in your studio?
So she came in a diploma. She came in. She had done a diploma at a school here, and she came in.
Okay.
And it was just a studio boy. She was the first. She was the first girl there. And I remember
Right,
even having some conversations with her and saying, because like it was just like you have conversations like, hey, like we have absolute confidence in you. You know, you just have to bring up that self-esteem as well, because sometimes you just discover, like, while talking to her, that it's sometimes not that even guys are even saying, hey, you can't speak here. It's not that. It's just that it's embedded in culture and nurture. I don't know what it is, you know. And you either get someone who can speak, who's not afraid to speak up, or you find somebody who doesn't speak up at all, you know.
Yeah.
And so for with her, we just built her confidence, and also teaching her to and I know I'm highlighting her. We have other ladies in the team, but for all of them, everyone in my team understands that it's normal for you to suggest an idea and for your idea to be critiqued. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, everybody understands that. So everyone now has that agency of, oh, this is what I think, and you're like, I don't think that's okay. But don't take it too personally. And that's the environment we're trying to create there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just to add, that probably comes from a culture of hearing everyone out and realizing that no story is stupid or no idea is irrelevant.
Or they're all stupid, or they're all irrelevant.
Right.
And we find the right one, you know? It's because that's also true sometimes.
Right.
You know?
Okay, Ferdy, I will let you take it over.
Hey, you know, I have been battling at the Village People Network while you guys were having the ball. So if I
Oh no, Freddie, your internet is off. Brian, if you have anything to
Okay,
add,
I'll just add. Yeah. So I mean, I think with regards to mentoring and regards to it needs to be structured. So it needs to be purposeful, and it needs to be intentional. So a situation where I'm going to give an example. So we were recently working on a visual effects segment or some visual effects for a movie that's going onto streamers or a big streamer. And, you know, I had the choice of working between several males, but there was one female in particular that I called her up and I said, you have to be on this project because your name is going to go on the end credits of a film that's going onto a large streamer, you know. And she was like, oh really, you know. So she before she even heard what the project was about, and I know she kind of came in with some fear and trepidation, like, this seems to be a big project, so how am I gonna, you know. I said, forget it, you're working on it whether you want to or not, you're going to work on it, you know. So I think, you know, that kind of gave her some confidence coming in that I had already, you know, said that she was going to work on it, and I was confident in her abilities to. And I mean, at the end of the day, she did deliver, and, you know, and went over and above. And when I compare with what the guys did, I had no regrets, you know, in bringing her on board. You know, so I think that kind of attitude needs to be, you know, kind of embedded, intentionality, and knowing that, yes, you're going to make sure that someone or a female on your team succeeds regardless of anything. I think that's the kind of intentionality that's necessary for us to be able to bring women on board the train. Thank you.
Freddie.
can you guys hear me now? Sorry, I battled the Village People Network. I think these village people are from Uganda, Raymond. But it's all good.
Excuse me, is this being recorded? This cannot go on record. No, thank you, Freddie. No,
they flew all the way from East Africa. But I think one of our own experience, last year was quite a defining one. We had pitched a project for MIFA, and then of course Christophe and the French team insisted that they wanted a female-led member from our studio, because and we offered to the ladies, and SN put herself forward that she was going to take it. I mean, she was scared, but we did the best we could to encourage her, and that was a good experience for both her and the studio. And I think one of the things I learned is it has to be a mutual effort to take risk, because a lot of times most of the women can be a bit reticent and not wanting to put themselves in a place that might show their vulnerability or weaknesses. And I do think for you to be able to change the equation as we currently have in the studio, it requires a couple of champions, women themselves that will take the step and at the end of the day put themselves out there and say, okay, I want to lead, I want to step forward. And she's now an aspiring producer for the studio outside of being an animator as well. So I think that's an opportunity that women themselves must show themselves ready for leadership. On the side of the men, I also think because a lot of times change is a design effort, it requires that we also become a bit more intentional about giving the women, like you all have said here, the opportunities to lead. We have to take a chance on them and provide maybe the guidance that is required, knowing that we really need to change the equation of balance in the industry. I cannot always argue why there are not a lot of women in the automobile industry, but I think that should never be the case for the creative industry and particularly animation, because animation being a story industry, women tell stories better. I mean, the story is just a refined gossip, if you ask me, and they do a great job at always keeping tales, the detail of the tales, right? So there's a way that if you allow them, they deepen a story even more. Something, there's a level of detail they are wired to bring to the equation. So we both have to see that effort. Women taking the risks to lead, and studios taking even more risks to give women the opportunities to lead.
I think we all agree definitely that there has to be that push from the men's side. They're just to push to make it happen. And there has to be that opportunity, like Brian said, like he selected someone that has to be on the team. Just talking in the sense of culture and policies within our organization. I know Raymond mentioned that everybody understands that you can all suggest an idea. Your idea will be on the table for people to hash or to make or to break, no matter what it is. What policies do you think as organizations we can put in place? I think whether they are subtle policies or whether they are implemented policies or they are just cultures for people to understand that there's a space for them as a woman coming into an animation studio or coming into your space. What kind of policies? It might not be policies that we've implemented yet, but what kind of policies do we think can actually help?
If I would step in, I would say some of the policies are already being forced upon us in the times which we live. I would say for most women, you would explore the option of very flexible work environment. And that's for them, it's also something that might favor them a little bit more. I mean, here in Magic Carpet, we always enjoy the camaraderie of working in the same space and having people come to bond in the studio. But for women, there could be some exemptions that is very required. I think those flexibility of work schedule is also something that might favor them. I also think we have to be intentional about creating maternity leaves for women who get married and start having children. And the reason, again, studios are not always the most structured or even have the resources with which they can keep you to go and leave and come back. But if we have someone who over the time in their contribution to the company have shown commitment, growth, it is only fair to that person that they start feeling like having a child is not a loss on their career. So we might want to flesh out a little bit more on those things. And I think when they start having children, having spaces in our office where if they have to bring their kids can camp would also be a great one. And because at the end of the day, you have to think about the life cycle of a woman and try to design a policy when they get married, when they get having children, how do their work contribution evolve? Will they be taken out because the work is not changing? I also think we have to be a bit more intentional to give them opportunities for training. Training is not something I think is easily found. I even think for the men as well. But for women, because we know that the challenges are always before us, we have to see how we can intentionally find mentors that can champion for these women and bring the courage, the guidance, the boldness that they require to lead in the industry. As part of the policy, again, I really think if it's possible for them to have things like stock options or royalty scheme for those of them that stay on a project from start to finish, that giving them the sense of ownership, most of them will really truly benefit from that. So I really think that if we take a little bit more in this policy direction, we will see a lot more attraction for more women coming into industry.
I think when it comes to My biggest the thing that I try my best to think about like nearly all the time with my studio is culture. And that might not be necessarily a policy question, but it's a question of if the environment your team is working in, right, is not a good environment, it will just you'll just see it, right? People will start complaining, people will start leaving. There'll just be this the let's call it an unfavorable environment. So I try my best to let my team have agency in the culture that's being developed. Of course, it does flow from me. There's some things that I want to see, but and also listening to, like, let's say what the women in my team say, and everyone in my team needs to hear what they're saying, because at the end of the day, the policy in my company is that we do let people be heard. We try our best to let people be heard, and try to understand where they're coming from. And just having this open policy, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to be implemented, but it just means that there's always a safe space for something that's either bothering you or something that you'd like implemented to be heard, right? And so it's been quite successful so far, at least when there's like an issue at the company, if there are, and they're not that many, but somebody has the freedom to come and talk to me or talk to someone else, and it always reaches me or it reaches my brother, and we always discuss it, and then we review. So it's not necessarily a industry policy thing, but it's an internal policy and culture awareness, cultural building awareness in my studio.
So I think, generally speaking, if we're going to be specific, well, I mean, to what Raymond said, you should already have like a culture that supports growth of the individuals that you employ or the individuals that you work with, irrespective of their gender. But if we're going to be like specific to females, I also think that they are usually, especially for the younger females, or for the ones who are not on the higher rungs of the ladder, so to speak, are the ones who are usually more susceptible to, abusive behavior or tendencies from other male colleagues. So I think, if we're going to be specific to females, then we probably, we need to set up a work environment that is, safe for them and free of any kind of abuse. So that also needs to be included in the policies that we work with in animation or creative industry in general.
Raymond mentioned something about having maternity leave and all that. I think because of this is something that I think is an unspoken conversation that happens in the industry. Like where I started my career, we had just few women working in that studio, and the few women I could count them, they were just like probably just two, and this is probably 2001, 2002, and so this has been long going. And even the second person then in the studio was my wife. We were both working in the same animation studio, and I remember asking questions about why can't we just have more women? And there was this unspoken thing about having women in the industry, and somehow just like having women generate, not in the industry, just in the workspace. I know how things have changed over the years, but it was just something like, nah, we can't have women. Next thing they want to get married. There's this conversation when they get married, they're no more, I'm going to be available when they get married. And then at that point in time, even though I was still new in the industry, it felt very weird to me. Like, so are we saying that it's a minus? That means we're not going to have women in the industry. We're not going to have women in the studio. And somehow it looked weird that if we do have women in the studio, it looked like some of them that were actively working and somehow could balance with work somehow had a tomboyish vibe, and it had a tomboyish vibe. So you could see that maybe they were just they could get along with guys easily, and that kind of thing. They were not too girly. Like I literally try to look back and try to look at the women, and most of them had a tomboyish vibe. So it was more of they could actually relate more with guys. They were not so girlish. So maybe psychologically, the guys didn't see them as a lady, so to say, in the sense they just felt like maybe it was more of like, we can vibe on, it's our own G kind of thing. So I always feel like now that I just had a kid, and after my wife had the kid, I had to stay at home, had to do so many things. And I remember coming back to the office and I was telling the human resource manager, guys don't need to stay in the office when their wife has kids. They need to go home. I was like, they need to get doing something. Now my kid is 1. I bring him to the office every day. I'm thinking like, this is me having a kid, and we don't. Our industry doesn't have so many married people. I know this number is very, very right. We don't have so many married people, so we don't even have people that have kids. And I started thinking, I need to start thinking about making spaces, especially for the women, because my wife is in the office and I'm working in the same office. But I started thinking that we have to start thinking, how are we going to make it convenient for them, especially them not feeling left behind because they had kids and they have to stay at home. Like my wife was pressuring me probably 3 months in. She said she wants to come to the office. She's not going to sit at home. And, I had to just, she said she wants to come to the office. So she doesn't want to sit at home and not do anything. Like this is what she wants to do. So I think just that thing of policies that enable it and, that are subtle, but also have a very big impact on why women will stay in the industry rather than change career paths. I think that's one thing. Not that, because I think in so many years, I've known so many talented women while I was still doing 3D those years that left the industry to the fashion industry. They left to other things. And those their skill sets, they just had to drop it because I feel like because it was not inclusive enough. It wasn't inclusive. They were just barriers at some point where they knew they were going to hit, because there was that thing of if I settle down, if I get married, if I have kids, like even this is something that happened years back in the banking industry. If you are getting married, you're probably going to lose your job. If you have a kid, you're probably going to lose your job. So it's not like Brian said, it's not just the animation industry. It's something that's happening, but the benefits, that's where I want to lead this conversation. What the benefits that we get of having more women in the industry, there are definitely benefits. Like what we see in your experience as a studio owner, what are the benefits you've seen that has come just having more women or having a woman on a project? What has been the benefits?
Well, I'll go first. I'll just say the guys in the studio seem to behave more, which is good. They seem to behave, and I think, like, especially because we've been doing a kindergarten show, it's quite interesting what the ladies have taught us, while doing this kindergarten show. Like, if it's a guy, it's like, let's put the kid on the top of the bus, and it's like, yo, you're teaching kids to go on top of vehicles, which is not a good thing to do. So like, we're like, oh, okay, no, we can't do that. So like, we there's just this maternal instinct that's been kicking in the reviews of Kunda and Friends, which have saved us a lot, and I think that was really interesting. It's not something that we're anticipating, but I think I think guys underestimate the power of the feminine touch, which is ironic because we all had mothers, and if you compare like the way your dad handled you and the way your mom handled you, you realize that you need both of these energies, right, to actually make a successful product and also to reach a successful to reach a wide audience. So there's some things that you might just be oblivious to, and you can only understand those things by just hearing different perspectives. And this cuts across. It's not only just, I know we're focusing on women here, but just to drive the example home, I'll say it's like you trying to make a film for a completely different culture and not taking the time to include someone from that culture to tell you, hey, no, actually the Nigerians don't kind of do this. If you want to depict a Nigerian properly, this might not be how, this might be offensive, or you might not be handling this subject with care. So it's I just think that by using examples like that, you can actually see the benefits of having women in the space. You just make I just think you just have more texture in the products. You know, like some of the decisions might be like, if it's a man, you just be testosterone. And I'm not saying all men are like that, but it tends to be, I want full on action. What do you mean the guy is going to cry in this scene? There's no time for crying, you know? He just needs to fight, 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 fight. And over time, what you find is that the men in the studio also become very aware of these things too. And also the ladies in the studio also become aware that, okay, you know, if I want to appeal to guys, maybe I need to do these kind of things. Men are like, oh, if I want to appeal to women, I have to do these kind of things. And that's not to say that there can't be some crossover, but it's interesting. Like, you just get diverse perspectives. That's what I've seen.
I mean, I can definitely relate to what. Freddie, go ahead. I'll wait for you.
Okay. No, I was saying that, yeah, and that's a very unique one. I really think for a story to truly travel, women generally enrich the depth and the depth of every story. One, it's again there is only a woman. A woman can tell you very well what it feels like to be one, and even when they interpret children. So for a child character, there is always a contribution a woman can make. And I think in my early days as a producer and a CEO, I didn't necessarily pay attention to this, but over the years, as I've seen women work on projects with us, I somehow appreciate their perspective on all of these things. And I think we always talk about African projects traveling. How do we make our stories universal? How do we make it globally appealing? I think globally appealing requires a measure of diversity, not just the target audience, but even the creative team. And that diversity requires that women have equal stake, or at least a significant stake on the table to be able to have a voice, the agency that is required to contribute and to shape that perspective. And I really want to say that apart from enriching that experience, something that came to my mind as we're talking is to really say that, yeah, globally, for animation, there is almost a double jeopardy. First of all, there is an underrepresentation for Black studios or Black content or Black people in the industry. I think just about 4% of the people in animation industry are said to be the Black people there. So when we now talk about women in animation, there is even a lesser number. So apart from being a black person, you're a female. It's almost like there is a battle on two spectrum of reality. So it's important for us to take that conversation. But to segue a little bit, as a matter of the educational process, the education is the pipeline that supplies the talent. I really think it's very important for those of us. I mean, I have an academy, and one of the things we're trying to do for the academy is to even have about 50% scholarship for women, to be able to give them that sort of support to come on board and learn. So that discount or that sponsorship or that can also attract a few more of them to come in and begin their careers. So I just wanted to add that at some point, that might also help us in attracting. But every woman's contribution to a studio makes it better. I haven't in our own lived experience seen any way that we have lost out by working with women in the creative process.
Yeah, I was going to say that I could definitely relate to what Raymond had said, about bringing in females into the workspace. The guys essentially seem to just shape up. They're a lot neater and tidier. There's all of those advantages to bringing the females on board. Well, another thing I would add, I mean, and it's pretty similar to what Ferdy has said, is that, I think one of our key strengths in being animation studios is even to tell African stories for a global audience. So not just, African stories for Africans, but African stories for a global audience. And, I think females play a very key role in that regard. We're a culture of storytellers as Africans. And if we look back in history, back to the whole fireside storytelling, it was usually the grandmothers who would surround themselves with all these youngsters and tell these stories. So I think there's a power in storytelling that is that comes predominantly from the female side. And if I look at us, for instance, there was a particular story that we were telling that had a female character, a girl as the main character, and the insights that we got from the females as far as the storytelling was concerned were invaluable. So I think it's absolutely necessary to have females on board.
I just want to ask, is it I don't know, like no, like as in, okay, no, but it's fine. Let me not ask it. It's okay.
No, go ahead.
No, it's better. It's okay. Just a thought, It's just a thought, because I know we're four founders here of our studios, right? I think I've known two of you guys for a very long time. Brian, we haven't really like talked like that much, but we know of each other. But I think it's important to understand that this panel here is to show that the founders and the leads of these studios are thinking about these things, because sometimes there's this tendency to say we need more female founders, but you can have a female founder that hires only men, and then you can have a male founder that's actually trying to fight for equality, and diversity. So it's that question of it's interesting to see how the rest of you are thinking, and I just want the audience, like when they're listening, that we are actually actively thinking about these things. We've tried so many methods to solve these problems, and we're still fighting for this as well. So I was just putting that out there.
So Raymond, it's interesting that you should say that, right? Because I know a female founder. I mean, and she's our friend. Every one of us in this panel, we know her, and I think her mindset is actually to hire females. She wants more and more females on board. And it's just a question of, are the females capable of handling it? So, but that's not even a big deal, because it's simply a gap that can be filled with training. So it's never a big deal. I mean, if we want to look at it critically, bringing females on board, they have an eye for detail a lot of the times that guys don't even have. So it behoves you to actually explore bringing more females on board in the creative roles in your team.
Yep. I think another thing that
I'm so sorry. I think most of us are already late in the game. Brian, if you realize, MB's wife and him worked in a previous company, and he carried her along to basement. And one of the reasons you could also have kept the female longer was to have married them. But for those of us who are already married, I guess we have to figure out other ways to do it at this point. And Andy was also a dancer, guys, but that's just an aside. Anyone who's single out there, you know where to go from here. The policies are already encouraged.
I think what Raymond said, that just for the audience to understand, because people are so curious, why are four guys speaking about this? It's like, we want this to happen as much as the women want it to happen. And again, it's even as much as we could have thrown in some female founders into this conversation, we want them to know that the male studio owners and founders want this to happen as much as they want, and we see ourselves as allies towards making this happen for the industry. I think one of the points that you made, Brian, about I think I've lost my trail of thoughts already. I've lost my trail of thoughts. But nevertheless, I think, another thing I wanted to mention is that even as much as we speak on technical roles, that's another thing that we are trying to also educate the women, because when people hear the word animation, they feel like they need to be artists. There are other roles within the animation industry that women can also build their skill set for, in that sense. I think everybody's disciplined. I hope it's not the Thanos finger that's happening.
Finally, we are alone. Yeah, I was getting tired of these other two guys. Now it's me and you. No, but let's keep on going. I don't know, maybe they've done that one.
Okay. So I think as much as they're trying to have other women in the industry, we also need to inform and educate the community that there are other skill sets that are required, and some of these skill sets are very transferable, in the sense that someone that's a fashion designer can be a character designer. We need to inform them of the things that someone that's on project management can come in as a production coordinator or production manager. Like, we just need to inform them there are more spaces. So one thing that we try to do in our studio is that as much as we are bringing in a guy for a role, we're bringing in a woman for that same role. So in every department, we have a guy and a woman in each role. Even down to the sound design department, we have a lady also doing sound design. You know, if we don't have, if we want to implement that, then we also have to consider the fact of providing training for people that also want to join that department. So even as much as they find their interest in a certain skill set, we now make sure we provide that training for so that they can actually match up with other people within the studio or within that department. So I think it's something that is very important. I don't know if we have any questions from people out there that want to say.
Brian said that he's backstage. I don't know if he can be brought back in. I think he was put backstage by mistake. But as we wait for the question, if there are questions, if there are none, I can just add a couple of things before we do our closing remarks, I think. But let me just fill the gap as we as you fixing that. I've been fun. So my view on all of this stuff is that you know, it's tricky. You know, it's not impossible, but it is tricky because, you know, you do not just want to hire for the sake of hiring, right? When somebody is not, because that's very disrespectful to the person. It always ends. It always ends badly. It tends to end badly. I wouldn't say it ends badly, but it tends to end badly. So if you try to hire for merit's sake, of course, then you run into another problem. There are not that many ladies who are practicing this, so you're always going to end up with guys who are practicing this, you know. So it's like this. It's this tricky situation where you have to open up the space for the opportunity, and then you have to support the ladies who join, and you also have to encourage them that that they can just be as good as anyone else. I think that's very important as well, and you give them the pathway to do so. Because what's interesting to me is that some of this stuff, it really comes down to just knowledge of the industry. One, how many jobs are actually available in the industry that someone can apply themselves to, right? That's like the first one. But then again, as a founder, in order to hire, let's say, cultural consultants, production designers, all these people on your projects, you're supposed to raise this enormous amount of cash to afford those roles. Because usually with our small studios, we usually just have the critical roles. You're like, I need a guy who can make the character move. I need a guy who can do this, you know? I need this person. So we're trying to fill those roles in first as we try to raise the money and the budgets to actually expand the production teams. Because on Kizazimoto, there was brilliant ladies all over the place, you know, like on my production team, and no one batted an eye, you know, like they're just as brilliant as the guys, and some were even more brilliant, you know. But it's like there was just a spectrum. But then again, that's a large production that can afford to, let's say, get people in all kinds of roles. But even in the critical roles, they were there. But then you would find that there was a concentration. Nearly all the ladies on the continent were working on Kizazimoto at that time. And so if you try to hire out of, if you try to hire at that time, you're like, they're no women. They're all working on Kizazimoto. They're working on any other project. And you're like, wow, okay. So there's this, it's an institutional task, but I think the studios, what our role is that when we do get these people, that we embed the confidence, we give them the pathway, we support them, and we also let the team know that the journey to getting there, we're an industry in its infancy, and the journey to getting there is that we need as many people as possible, you know, both women and men, and whatever we can do, we need to support them. That's what I think, you know. So.
Okay, Brian, do you have any last thing, or Fred, do you have any last things to say?
I think for me, my concluding thoughts would be this is a journey, and it requires collaboration. And I would say if you're a lady and you're a great storyteller and you love the medium of animation, there is no better time than now to get into the industry and start building from where you are. But like with many things, it's a game of excellence. If you become very good at what you do, you won't have to look for studios. Studios will look for you. And I think it's about perfecting your skill, investing in yourself to become an exportable talent. And I think that's the goal. We need African female to lead, and we are looking for female that will lead. But again, we don't want women to hide under the guise of gender, to take opportunities of the scarcity of people to perpetuate mediocrity. We're hoping that women will use the scarcity of gender of women in this space to rise and contribute to our quality of stories and help us to build this industry and even the continent. That would be my thoughts.
Okay, so I think that presently there's a lot of, and I've noticed that. I don't know if you guys have noticed it as well, that wherever you go, there's grants for females, there's this for females, there's that for females in Africa, so I think there's no better time than now for females in the industry, no matter what you do, to put yourself out there, let people know you, let people know about what you do. And, if you do need mentorship, I think that a lot of guys are open to, helping you. A lot of studios are open to bringing you on board. So find mentors if you need to. Find people who can champion your cause. Find people who are willing to take you to that next step if this is what you want to do. I mean, animation is difficult. I remember my lecturer in school saying that animation is for people who are masochists. You have to enjoy or endure a certain level of pain, but the reward for wanting to do it is also immense, because when you see what you've had a hand in on the screen, there's no better reward, to be honest. I think there's other rewards like receiving an Annie or something, but I mean there's nothing like it. So please reach out to us, reach out to people who you feel can mentor you and help you on your journey. Thank you.
I think what we want is, if you're a woman in the animation industry, you're just looking for a space, you can join the AFRO Women Animation program that's happening 22nd. It'll be live online, and we'll have some physical sessions in Lagos, Nigeria. And there's no better time to join. Like Freddie said, now is the time. There's so much opportunities, like Brian says, there are opportunities for grants to actually enable that to work. I think also as studio owners, we need to take advantage of those opportunities that help us to implement this this movement. Also, you can join the community. We started the community over a year now, and I think we have over 100 women in the community, and we've had testimonies from just sharing opportunities. That's what we're majorly doing now. There's an opportunity, we share it to them, and we push them to apply. And we've had a number of women from the community that applied for the lab with the director's lab or producer's lab with Triggerfish, and we've had like 2 women from the group. We had a number of them just make decisions, and even when you ask them these questions, they all say the same thing: I didn't want to apply. I just felt like, I think there's this sense of not feeling good enough or not ready or not, so I think it's important that we keep on celebrating the women we have in our studios or around us. Like, we take our time to intentionally celebrate them, not just like their posts, but reshare their posts and write something that goes with it. I think it's intentional, where they know that one woman is being celebrated, another woman sees it and she's inspired by that and she tries to do it. I think that's one thing that if we have to do it just individually, if we're not studio owners. So I'll say this is for all the men, that if you have to do it, celebrate another woman, wherever she is, just celebrate. Push out her name, push out her project, push out her own work, celebrate what the little thing that she has done, and just make sure that it's just in the face of other people, and this little seed will eventually bear its own fruits. So thank you to everyone for really joining this session. Like you have on the screen, it's 22nd. We have other sessions that will be coming up within Wednesday and Friday, and we hope that you guys can join us. I really just want to appreciate you guys for making our time, and it's the moment for
Is this the only all-male panel? This is the last one, right?
Yeah, this is the first and the last.
Okay, cool. So just putting that out there. It's the first and the last one. Like there's
This is
a
part of
lot
the
of
last one. Don't
a
worry.
lot of amazing ladies. And they're like I've seen Comfort, I've seen like Monia, like these are all brilliant ladies. They've been in the space for a long time, and so I think that they should attend those. Like I don't know. I don't know. Whenever I travel to like festivals and stuff, Mo is just surrounded by the ladies are the ones who are actually at the festivals striking the deals. Doing all this stuff. I'm like, guys, I think that they're more powerful than they know, right? And yeah, so that's it. Sorry, I just wanted to add that there because I didn't say. I was just filling the gap while these guys were connecting. So those are my last words.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you for having us. And bye-bye to everyone.
And thanks for having us as well. Thanks.
Your village internet there, man. No. Right, bye, guys.